All right, I'm letting people in. We will be starting here in another few minutes, but I just wanted to get the doors open and get people logging in. So I thank everybody for being here. And we got quite a few coming in already. So this is great. I'm excited about this. I'm really excited to listen to what Brian has to say. And so it looks like you are too, because we do have quite a few people coming in right away. So we will get started here in like a minute once I feel that we got most of the people on board, and we will get going. And obviously I'll do a little pre-discussion before we go hand it over to Brian. All right. And then I guess as long as we are about to start, and I assume you can hear me and you can see Brian's slide that's titled, "Why Can't I Turn Off?" But in the chat, can you just tell me that you are hearing me and that you see the slides, please? Unless chat's disabled. If it is, go into the Q&A, because I think last time chat was disabled. Okay, chat is not disabled. I'm very happy about that. And I'm very happy to hear people saying you hear and you see. That helps a lot in these presentations when you can actually hear and see what's going on. So I'm excited to know that that is working. All right, we are technically 40 seconds in past the top of the hour, so I'm going to start my portion while some more people are still getting on. But I'm very happy with the audience we got coming in here now. All right, so a few housekeeping things before I hand it over to Brian. I'm Randy Crabtree, partner, co-founder at Trimerit. We started this series, which I call Practice Management Series, earlier this year, and I've been so excited, and the speakers we've had on it, including today's, obviously, and I'll hand it over to him in a minute. This is available for CPE. And so, as normal, you got to follow the rules. We are going to have polling questions pop up. You need to answer 3 of the 4 polling questions. You need to stay logged in for 50 minutes, and we will go at least 50 minutes, obviously, to give you that opportunity to get your CPE. Mark, who's our head of marketing, is not here right now with us. He's actually at Dreamforce, learning a lot of things this week. But he will get the certificates mailed out to you fairly quick. Haley internally works on that as well. If there's any questions, you can reach out to us, but that should go out pretty quick. I think we got the system down well. This will be live on or up on YouTube tomorrow as well. So, I'm sure you're going to be completely impressed with what Brian has to say, and you're going to want all your friends to go take a look at it. So you can direct them to Trimerit's YouTube page tomorrow, and we will see that. With that being said, I am going to hand it over to Brian Cush. Brian is a partner with Intend to Lead. Today, you can see what he's going to talk about. And again, I want to thank Brian for being here. Brian, it is all yours.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Trimerit, Barry, Divine, Mark Reese, Haley Kretschmer, who helped to make this possible. I'm really excited to be with everyone today. I realize, depending on where you're coming from, it might be afternoon, it might be morning, but I'm really excited to be with you. Let me just first start out before I introduce myself and talk about what we're going to talk about today. The first Superman movie, so it was done in 1978. Okay, the first Superman movie, and in that movie, Clark Kent's Superman's father says, "Hey, Clark, you are here. You are on Earth. You are here for a reason." So I don't know why I always remember that. You are here for a reason. So that's my opening question to those people that are here today. What was the reason why you chose to be here today? So if you could just throw in the chat, and I realize you might be getting CPE for this, but beyond that, what is the reason why you chose this session? You chose to be here. So if you're in the audience today, please put in the chat, what's the reason why you chose this? And as you do that, I will introduce myself and talk about what we're going to talk about today. So as Barry said, my name is Brian Cush. I am an accountant, a CPA turned leadership coach. I worked in public accounting for about 14 years in consulting and as an auditor. And then for the last 14 years or so, I've been a leadership coach. I am amazed. I am privileged to do the work that I do. I work with accounting leaders to help them become more intentional in their life. And when I use that word intentional, to me, it means hey, how do you line up? How do you align what you really care about, the impact you want to make on others, the leader you want to be? How do you align that to how you show up for others and the actions that you take? To me, that's about being intentional. And that's what I do as a leadership coach. I work for a company called Intend to Lead, as Barry said, and we coach accountants to access what we call the dimension of possible. All right. And we do that through three things. Number one, we do leadership coaching. Number two, we do group learning. And we also work with accounting firms, partner with them, consult with them to help them to innovate the way they do leadership development and to create more of a coaching culture. So we are a coaching company. And I'm going to be asking you lots of questions because that's what I like to do as a coach. Sure, I have a lot to share with you and I'm really excited, but I'm going to also ask you a lot of questions and I appreciate the answers. And I'm already getting some good answers here, right? Jenny says, I'm looking for balance in life. Kelly, the title spoke to me as I can't turn off and work all the time. Kelly, thank you for being here. We all need to be able to turn off from work. And that is why we're here today. And I hope to give you some specific strategies with that. All right. Brett said, I want to relax when not working. That is awesome, right? When we're not relaxed, when we're not working, we're not bringing our best selves to everything else we want to do in our world, in our lives. And that is a shame. And I've been there also, right? So when you truly turn off, I want you to be turned off so you can turn on to everything else. So I'm glad you're here, Brett. Chelsea said for better work-life balance. Yeah, that's it, right? Okay. Jill, increasing focus on mental health within our firm. Right. I love that. And I know Barry and Trimerit are doing a mental health webinar next week. And I think this will be somewhat complementary to that because this is about mental health in a lot of ways. Let's see some of the other answers I'm getting. Looking for tips to disconnect from work. I think it's Lima who said that. Beautiful. That's exactly what I hope to give you today. All right. And then Katie said, my husband keeps telling me to turn off work. All right. So that's why you are here today. I love it. All right. So you all are in the right place. And I feel supported by you already just by your answers. Okay. There's really two reasons why I'm here today. And the first reason is I am tired of people feeling burnt out in our profession. We attract so many awesome, conscientious professionals to our profession. I love working with the people that I work with just because they're so high integrity, so awesome, just so conscientious. But too many of us feel burnt out, feel overwhelmed all the time. So we've got to change that. That's the number one reason I'm here. The second reason I'm here is whenever Intend to Lead and me and my partner, Sarah, whenever we put together content, we also design these sessions for ourselves, okay? The things we're going to talk about today, I have struggled with mightily in my life, all right? I've had significant stress issues in my life. And you know what? Stress has affected my health, and especially my sleep for over 20 years, okay, over 2 decades. I have started to make real changes, and those changes have changed my life. And part of the reason that I'm here today is because I want to share some of those changes with you, all right? It's helped my efficiency, it's helped my stress, but being able to turn off from work has helped me be a better brother, a better husband, a better father, a better colleague, a better friend. And I really want that for you too. But at the same time, I have not perfected this. So I'm also here as a co-learner with you. And I'm very excited for all of you to be here with me. All right. My first question for you is, what does the word boundary mean to you, right? So when you hear that word boundary and relating to setting boundaries in your life or in your work, just what comes up for you, right? So I'm going to see what you all come up with here in terms of what does that word boundary mean for you, right? We talk a lot now. I feel like it's kind of a buzzword, right? I've got to be able to set boundaries. Maybe we've said that before, but I feel like over the last year or two, it's come up even more. All right. So Katie said, that's about creating limits. It's about actually having a cutoff, right? Yeah, I do like that word limit a lot. I think a boundary in a lot of ways is like a healthy limit, a healthy cutoff. Okay. And here's the deal. I remember hearing this from someone. Oh, by the way, Chelsea added creating separation between personal and professional life. That's a really good example of a boundary, right? That separation, that's a boundary. Okay. And then Michelle said, I don't know what the word means, right? And so that's why we're here, to help define what the word is. And again, the definition that's worked best for me is a healthy limit. Healthy being a key word. Okay. I can't remember who said this, but there's a good quote that says a boundary is not a boundary if it's not tested, right? So when we create boundaries, when we create limits to what we do and won't do, they're going to be tested. If they weren't tested, we wouldn't have to create them. All right. So keep in mind, we're going to help you with creating some boundaries today. They're going to be tested. I promise you. All right. Brett said cutoff, not blurred with work from home. Good, good. I love it. All right. So, I talked about this a little bit already, but we have coached. One of the reasons why I'm here is because we have coached at Intend to Lead many accountants. And one of the things that our coachees talk a ton about, that we've already started talking about, that I know resonates with our audience already, is just that challenge of leaving your work for tomorrow, actually letting go of it, actually saying, hey, you know what, there is a limit I'm going to create at which in my day, I'm actually going to stop working and I'm going to let it go for tomorrow or let it go for Monday. All right. This is a very specific boundary challenge that we're going to tackle today, right? How do I let go? And you'll have a very specific strategy coming out of it. Okay. And by that, I mean very specific. This is not like a general time management class or a session generally on looking from a higher level at boundaries in our life, or a big picture view of these concepts. This is a very specific session that we're going to talk about with this one specific challenge. All right. And what I want you to be able to take out of today is a very repeatable process that you can use every single day that you work to take back your life. All right. And I will say this, I wish I had this session 20 years ago. I also truly believe that every single accountant in the entire world should be exposed to these concepts, no matter what level you're at. And that's why I'm excited that this is going to be on YouTube and that we can share it with other people as well, because I feel strongly about that. I wish every single accountant would be exposed to these concepts. And I never had been as I was growing up as an accountant. All right, so we hear the term a lot, right? Accountants use the term turning off all the time. I need to be able to turn off better, right? Don't we say that to each other a lot? So I want to just ask for you, just let's get simple. What does that term even mean to you? When you use that term, I want to be able to turn off, right? What does it even mean? What does it mean to turn off? So if you can throw in the chat some of your thoughts there, right? What does it mean for you to be able to turn off from work, right? We use that term like it's a light switch. Yeah. So Katie said completed tasks accomplished needed today, right? So that not only having those tasks completed, Katie, but also the feeling of, guess what? I can be complete. I can be complete. I can actually have that sense of completeness, which allows me to turn off. All right, Chris, wow, got really truthful there. I love it. I've never been able to turn off. And we'll talk about that, right? Okay. And Nick says not worrying about unfinished projects, right? When I continue that worry, that means I'm not turned off, even if I feel like I've stopped my work, right? Kayleen said less anxiety and always thinking about work and what needs to get done. All right. Wow. This is a theme because Jenny said it too. Stop thinking about work. Focus on the present, where I am physically. Be where I am, right? Be present instead of thinking about what I was doing 2 hours ago or what I need to do and get done by Friday. Love it, Jenny. So that's a big part of it. All right. Deadlines create the inability to turn off when work needs to be done and can't wait till tomorrow. Yeah, there you go, Katie. Yeah, that's what I want to know. What gets in the way of you turning off really well each day? Share some more ideas on that, right? I have the need to complete projects. Good one, Kelly. Because you know what? A lot of times what happens is if I feel like I'm not complete, then I can't turn off. I can't turn off my brain or I can't stop working. Okay, now here's my next question. I want you to focus on this one too, and let me know what you think here. What happens when you're not good at turning off? Especially if it happens more than once, especially if it happens chronically, habitually, every day. right? What does turning off mean? And what happens when you're not good at it? What is the cost? What is the impact? Right. So I'd like you to think and share in the chat how you're feeling about what is the cost of not being able to turn off. Okay. So Chris said you don't have any one job well, right? So yeah, you don't feel good. You don't feel like you're doing well. But what is the real cost? Yeah, Laima said, causing a constant worry and stress. Wow. And what's the impact of stress on your life? All right, less sleep. Kayleen, I love it because that's where it impacts me too. When I can't turn off, especially my brain, I struggle in sleeping. And when I struggle in sleeping, like you said, I have poor health overall, right? And Chelsea, never ending stress. Our body is not equipped to chronically deal with stress. It just isn't. That's just not how we work. So yes, that constant anxiety is huge, right? So there is such a cost here. When we're not able to turn off, there are lots of costs. There are physical, stressful costs, less joy, as Jill just said, right? Yeah, that I love that one. That makes me sad, right? I don't get to experience the joy, my potential for joy in my life. Right? We're also just not able to turn on to the rest of our life, right? We're not able to turn on and be present with other people. We're not able to be present with people that are probably the most important people in our lives, right? Our friends or our family or other things that we want to be doing, besides our jobs. Okay. Sounds like sleep is a big impact and a big cost here. All right. So I think we can all agree here that one of the things that I've had to learn over my life, and I wish I had learned this when I was a lot younger, which is sometimes in order for us to understand what healthy is, we have to understand and we have to acknowledge when we haven't been healthy. Okay. And that's actually taken me a lot of time, some therapy to get to a point where I've actually understood that. I have to acknowledge, in order to be healthy, I have to acknowledge what I've done or what I'm doing that's not healthy. And I have to realize that it's not healthy. If I'm not able to turn off, especially if that's chronically happening, if that's happening a lot, that is not healthy. That leads to mental health issues. That leads to stress, chronic stress. That leads to physical symptoms, right? So we've got to realize, we've got to acknowledge that in ourselves, that it's not okay for us not to be able to turn off from work. Maybe it happens once or twice or a couple times, that's great. But when it's happening all the time, that is not okay. That is not healthy. Can we all do that now? Can we all acknowledge that is not healthy? All right, beautiful. Let's go on now. All right, so what I want to do now is we can run a poll. We're going to run a poll for you. And I just want you to start to assess your ability, your confidence in your ability to turn off. Right? How would you rate? We're really asking you to assess your confidence right now in your ability to turn off daily. Right? And so what we're going to do is we're giving you the chance now to self-assess, right? Which I believe is great. I love to self-assess. It brings a little bit more awareness. It brings issues to the forefront, right? So we're going to do this now. We're actually going to do this exact same poll at the end, and I want to see if there are any differences.
All right, I've got this up and running. We have about 87% have put in their answers so far. So a few more, and then I will close this and share. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that the poll question number 1 is currently up.
Yeah. And I love the comments continuing to come in the chat. Chris said, in my generation, we were taught that the harder you work and the longer you work, and I would almost underline longer, indicates your value. Chris, that's an interesting comment, right? What you're doing.
Sorry,
Go
Brian,
ahead,
let me
Ray.
add one thing. Somebody asked how you respond. If you're logged in, so Zoom is not great on a website. Zoom, you should have the PC app for it, and you may not be able to respond, unfortunately, if you're going through the Zoom website. It looks like most people are not doing that, but whoever asked that question, just type in the chat or the Q&A. Just type in the Q&A that you're here for this polling question, and we'll make sure you get your CPE. All right, and I'm going to close this now, Brian, and share the results with you. And here, do you see that, Brian? Or
I do. Thank you,
okay.
Randy. Yes, I do. Right. And great. We had 31 people respond. And The most common answer is I am just terrible at this. And 1 and 2 dominate the results, right? So we're coming clean, right? I love this. We're acknowledging that this is a problem. This is a challenge. A few people in here, and I'm going to want to hear from you, right? Especially as we get into some of these strategies. What's working for you to be able to get to a good place where you can turn off? So that's beautiful. But yes, very much dominated by a 1 and 2. So this is a struggle for many of us. Okay, just want to go back to a comment that Chris made in the chat, and that's about the belief that the longer I work, that indicates my value. That is what it is. It's a belief. And as a human being, we actually have this amazing power to separate ourselves from our beliefs, because we are not our beliefs, right? We are actually the observer of our beliefs, and we get to decide, hey, is a belief that I have, is that serving me? So what are the beliefs that you have? And it might be something similar to what Chris said, that make you feel almost guilty to turn off or to stop working, and really to examine those beliefs. And the big question I like to ask isn't necessarily, is that belief totally right or wrong or whatever? It's more about, is that belief really serving me to have the life that I want? Is that belief serving me? Because at that point, when you start to challenge it, you realize that we are really the author of our beliefs. What's another belief that I can share that will help me to feel better about turning off? Right? So challenge your beliefs, and we're going to continue to do that through as we go along today. Thank you, Chris, for that. All right. So even after we have tried to finish our work for the day or the week, when we don't turn off, right, we do 2 obvious things. This is going to sound like I'm Captain Obvious, but I'm going to say it anyway, right? The ways that we don't turn off, we do one of 2 things, right? I continue to do work. I pick up my phone, even when I'm trying to go to sleep, like this lady is, or I just stay at my laptop. So I continue to do work. When I continue to do work, when I want to stop, that is not turning off. That is obvious. But the other big way we don't turn off is maybe we physically stop doing our work, but we still think about it. It's still going on in our brain. We're still not present in our day, right? So the 2 obvious ways we don't turn off, we either continue to do work, we think about doing work, right? And then when we don't do that, we do all the stuff like we just said. We're not as present with our family. We're not as engaged. We're not in the moment. We don't sleep well. We don't recharge. Those are huge long-term costs. We're going to work with both of those today. And what we're going to do is we're going to provide you what we call a formal shutdown ritual. Okay, a formal shutdown ritual, something you can do every single day to turn off, and most importantly, to turn on to what you want to be engaged with. Right. And I know every single person that's attending this today that you felt it before. You've noticed there are times when maybe you were turned off while you were doing something in your life that wasn't accounting, that brought you alive. And you know what I will say, when you do that, you actually become a better accountant. That sounds kind of counterintuitive, right, Brian? How am I a better accountant? By doing good things in my life that aren't accounting. You do, because you become a more balanced person, right? And then you become more focused when you do come back. But when we don't have that formal shutdown ritual, that boundary, we have nothing to stop us and allowing us to kind of recharge in the rest of our life. All right. So we're going to give you 3 parts to a formal shutdown ritual that you can implement every single day. All right. Part 1, and this is something I bet you're already doing to some extent. So what I wanted you to do is I want you to think about what you're doing, what is working for you, what is not working for you. Do you want to tweak it? Do you want to add to it? I'll give you some ideas today. Okay. But part 1 of your shutdown ritual is to bookmark your work. All right. Now, a bookmark is really important, right? Why do we, if we're reading a physical book, why do we have a bookmark? The reason we have a bookmark is so that we can close the book. Okay, that's what we need to do. We need to close our work. But the bookmark is important because we know where we left off from today, and we know where to start from the next day. All right, so now I want to ask you, are there certain practices that you do at the end of the day that help you to bookmark your work? Right? What do you do in those cases? What do you do at the end of the day? What sometimes, it could be something like, hey, you know what? I look at where my projects are. For me, one of the best things for me is I look at the projects that are giving me the most stress, and I actually document what the very next action step is I'll do the next day. Okay, because I can't finish the whole project, But what I can do is I can document what the very next thing I'm going to do. Okay. And what I want you to do is you start to think about what your bookmark practice is. I want you to actually write it down now. Okay. So Chelsea said, leave myself a Post-it note. So that Post-it note is working as your, Jenny says, I leave Excel sheets open or programs open on my computer that I'm working on. So they're in the same spot tomorrow. Very nice, right? That is something you're doing every day. And I want you to think about it as part of your shutdown ritual. You're doing that intentionally to allow yourself to let go. Okay. Another thing I like to do is I actually like to look at my calendar for the next day, right? What are my appointments? What are my meetings that I have? What space do I have, that white space? And what I like to do is, especially the things that are providing me stress right now, I actually like to fill in what I'm going to use my white space for the next day, right? So I have one meeting and then I have a half-hour break and then I have another meeting. If I'm not good and planned, I don't do very well in that half hour. But if the night before I've actually planned what I'm going to get done in that half hour, I do really well and I feel good leaving the day because I have a plan. That's part of your bookmark, right? So I want every single one of you to think about what is my best bookmark. And if any of you have good ideas and you've already started sharing them with us, put them in the chat. What works well for you to bookmark your work every single day? Okay, it's a good question. So we just got a question from Paul. What do you do when there are several important projects all pending? So some considerations there, Paul, is you could look at all of the projects and document one thing about them. You could actually prioritize them and say, hey, what are the projects? And what I like to do in terms of a shutdown ritual is think about the projects that are actually stressing me the most, because those are the projects that are going to not allow me to stop thinking about work. Take those projects and document something that helps you to let it go, to bookmark it, to close the book. And it could be, what are your latest thoughts on it? It could be, what's the next planned action step? Whatever you need to do to feel like I can mentally let that go. And this is all a learning process. You're going to have to tweak it as you go along. Great question, Paul. Thank you for that. All right. So that is step one. All right. Bookmarking your work. And I want you guys to think of this as an experiment, right? Where it's not like, hey, I have to have perfection right away. It's a plan that you're going to tweak with time. You're going to keep learning, right? And you need to be asking yourself, what is working and what is not working? If something is working in terms of my bookmarking, I need to keep doing it. All right, so that was part one, creating your bookmark at the end of each day. Part two, and this is a huge part of a shutdown ritual, okay, that I never did. And now I realize the importance of it. Part two is to actually create an instead of plan. An instead of plan, what the heck does that mean, Brian? All right, we need to realize that to truly want to turn off, we have to start doing things we weren't doing before. What you're doing is if you're not turning off really well every single day, what are you thinking about at the end of your days, or even as you're going to sleep? You're thinking about work, right? So what you need to do, instead of saying, I don't want to think about work, that's actually hard because your brain is monitored to do it. What you have to do is you have to replace your thinking. You have to come up with an instead of plan. And I would actually challenge you to do it every single day. If I'm not going to think about work, if I have something stressing me, I have to ask myself, what am I going to think about instead? That sounds, again, maybe like Captain Obvious, but you actually have to have a plan. What am I going to think about instead? So ask yourself two questions as part of your instead of plan. What am I going to do after work? And what am I going to think of? And you're due, if you have something planned, it's obvious. It's already there for you, right? I'm going to go to a book club, or I'm going to go talk to my friend or whatever. Then it's done. But the times where it's most needed is when you don't have a plan. Because what happens if you don't have a do plan and a think of plan? You revert to your old habits, and then you find yourself back at your laptop, or you find yourself thinking about that project that's been stressing you. Okay, Katie just said, oh no, I have to talk to my husband now about something different than work. I love that, Katie. Now you have to come up with an intentional plan every day. If I'm going to talk to my husband and I'm not going to revert back to my old not turning off habits, what am I going to think about or talk about with my husband instead? Love it. That's what the instead of plan is. You writing down, and I'll tell you, this didn't work for me until I actually would write it down. I would actually write it down on a piece of paper, what I'm going to do and what I'm going to think about. Two simple little things each day. And what I would do is every single time I would notice myself thinking about work, I would have that sticky with me. Oh, you know what? I plan to do this instead. So this, to me, is the most underrated part of your shutdown ritual, which is if you're going to decide to be intentional about not doing and thinking about work, what are you going to do instead? And for me, it gets fun because I can think about all the other things I want to do in my life. And I created a book list of the things I want to read and things like that. And it gets real for me, right? And I'm being intentional about saying what my boundary is here. All right. So does everyone understand part two? If there are any questions, throw them in the Q&A. All right. But keep in mind, if you're not going to do work, what are you going to do instead, right? You have to think about it. It could be exercise. It could be socializing. It could be reading. What I found is not a fictional reading can be really good, because sometimes if I do nonfiction reading, it's actually a little bit close to what I do as my day job. And I start noticing myself thinking about work. But when I go read about some fantasy or something that's really immersive, I don't think about work as much. So sometimes a fiction book works really well for me. It could be doing music, right? What is your instead of plan? Okay. And if you have any good ideas for yourself today or this weekend or whatever, throw them out in the chat. I just love hearing people's ideas. So what could your instead of plan be? And remember, a lot of times you have to answer two questions. What am I going to do? What am I going to think about? And the key part is thinking about, because when you start to revert to thinking about work, you have to have a go-to place, a go-to thinking idea. All right. So we've gone through number one and number two of your shutdown ritual. Number one, bookmark your work. Create a daily practice that you can do every single day to feel good about your work. One thing I didn't mention about that, which is really important to me, well, we'll get to it in a second. I'll hold that. Part two is create, even write down your instead of plan. All right, now let's go to number three.
And before we do that, why don't I put poll number 2 up? Does that sound fair, Brian?
Sounds great. I'm excited.
All right. Poll question number 2. I'm going to launch now. It's pretty easy. Are you still here? Yes or no? We're getting some quick responses on this one. Not a lot of thought process going into, are you still here?
Yeah, there you go. Much faster than the last one. Yes, I like it.
All right, and I'm not going to keep this up long. It looks like pretty much at least in the same amount of people that responded last time responded this time. So I'm going to close this in like 3 seconds. If anybody else wants to put in their response, and I'm not going to I'm closing. I'm not going to share the responses because all of you said yes, you are still here. So, all right, Brian, all you.
Now, there were no mysterious no's. I wonder what a no would have been like. Anyway, okay, here we go. All right, so we've talked about part one and part two. Now let's get to part three. Part three of your shutdown ritual is to actually perform a shutdown practice, right? So these practices can be mental, they can be physical. What is it going to take? What are you going to do at the end of your day that actually gets you into the mode of transitioning to what you want to do next, which is not work? All right. It could be something like 1 minute of meditation. It could be something like celebrating what you did today. Okay. I know that sounds kind of crazy, and I don't know many accountants that do that. I think we should actually do more of that. I'd love to hear from you on this, but I feel like as a profession, for some reason, many of us get into our minds that the way we end our day, and I'll tell you, I've been really, really guilty of this. The way I tended to end my days until I became intentional and made a change was I would always be thinking about the work I didn't get done. I would be thinking about what I could have done. In fact, sometimes I would beat myself up about my to-do list, right? Because I would have 5 things on my to-do list. They were all important. I'd look at the end of the day. Have you ever had a day like that and you didn't get any of them done? But I know I did work. I know I worked hard. Think about the impact that has when the end of your day is about your own personal failure, when it's about you beating yourself up. So I'd love to hear from you. Do any of you all have that challenge as well, where at the end of your day, you feel like, wow, it's you focus on what you didn't get done. You focus on what you still have to do. And it almost feels like you're a failure. It almost feels like, wow, I worked hard, but I'm coming up short. That's probably the best way to say it. So what I like to challenge you on, even if it's hard, maybe one of the ways you could end your day is actually focusing on at least 1 or 2 little things you did get done. And if it's even like you had a really tough day and you felt like you didn't get a lot done, can you at least acknowledge the work you put into it? Okay, so to me, this is a big part. It gets to the mental issue of being able to let go. How do you end your day? This has been a game changer for me. When I noticed how negative I was and how that would usually lead to me wanting to feel guilty about the working more or not working, I changed that. And I said, even if it's tough, I'm going to acknowledge something I did get done. I'm going to pat myself on the back, at least about my work ethic that day. Okay, this physical practice could be actually physically saying something like shut down complete, almost like we're a computer, right? Or what I like to say is, hey, I am turning off now. I am turning off from work now. If you physically say that, even if there's no one in your office, right? Like maybe you're in your home office, there's no one there. You're actually saying to yourself and you're almost declaring to the universe, you know what? I am letting go now. Okay, some other ideas here, right? It might be your transition is about playing some music you like. Some people have told me they like to play the same music every day. Maybe it's a genre of music that you like that you feel like, hey, this transitions me into the next phase of my day, which is that turned off phase. All right. It could be doing something. I like to actually push my laptop down. I like to turn off my lights in my office. And as I'm doing things like that, not only am I physically shutting down, but I think about it in my mind. Right. So all of these practices are getting you into the mode of telling yourself, I am letting go. I am turning off. I'm transitioning to my next, which isn't work. All right. It could be something like I like to do this on every Friday. I like to write a handwritten note to somebody. It just makes me feel good. Or I like to write something that I'm gratuitous for, right? Something I'm thankful for in my life. That has been a game changer for me. And the reason for that is because on Friday, I'm usually going to be with my family or something like that. And if I can actually change my mental state by writing something I'm thankful for, I just show up in a different manner for them. Right. So I'm throwing lots of ideas out there at you, but I want you to think about your part 3. Write it down. What could be your physical or mental shutdown practice? Right. It could be some people like to maybe just clear your desk. Right. Maybe you dust it. Maybe you put a pencil away or something. That sounds so simple, but if you mentally see that as a habit that you're doing that is physically helping you to shut down, but also mentally declaring it to the world, it becomes powerful. All right. Maybe it's an affirmation saying something like, I did the best I could today, right? I am done with work today. I am turning off now. These are huge. They're powerful. It could be writing in a journal, something you're happy for, something you did get done in a day. Again, this changes your mental state as you're doing this important transition, as you're doing your shutdown ritual. All right. So I'd love to hear if anybody has any ideas for yourself, right? Because they have to work for you, right? The makeup of your office might be different. You might be at home, you might be in the office, at your work, it might be different, but I'd love to hear from you. What are some ideas you have for that physical or mental shutdown practice? All right. So here's a summary of what we've done today. Remember, there are 3 parts to this, right? And I actually want you to be meticulous about the order. That doesn't mean that you couldn't do your instead of plan before your bookmarking. Although for me, I've always wanted to do the bookmarking because that's the most work related part of this for me. That's it. That's the important part for me. But what I want you to do is you're going to experiment. You're going to probably tweak and change your shutdown ritual as you get into it. But I do want you to be meticulous about once you have it to actually use the same order every day. And the reason for that is because our brains are very habitual, right? And the more we do things where we do it the same every day, it actually becomes more ingrained into our brain and it becomes more of a habit. All right. So again, number 1, what is your bookmark practice? Write it down. Do that first. What's really cool is if you can share with a colleague or someone at work what your bookmark practice is, share it with them, see what theirs are. There's lots of good learning to be had there. Okay. And that helps you actually become a more effective accountant, if you ask me, by having a solid bookmarking of your work. What's working? What's going to make you most effective the next day? And of course, what's going to help you to be able to shut down today? All right, number 2, what is your instead of plan for tonight? Write it down. Maybe consider writing it down every single day. And remember, the instead of plan is 2 parts. So what am I going to do and what am I going to think about? And they can be similar. right? If I'm going to read a fictional book, that's kind of similar. That's something I'm physically going to do and something I'm also going to think about. All right. And then what are your 3 to 5 shutdown practices, right? Consider using the different senses, right? Could it be smell? Could there be a candle that you light as you're shutting down if you're working at home, or a candle that you burn out? That's really cool, right? Because you're using your sense of smell, right? Could it be something that you eat as you finish your work every day? That sense of taste, right? And what are the things that you physically see in the world? So think about the different things that you can do that would hit the different senses. All right. Less can be more too. Don't feel like you have to do 8 shutdown practices. Maybe it's just one, right? Maybe it's just every day, just lowering your laptop. That is signifying to you and to the world you're done. Okay. All right. I'd love to hear, if you want to throw in the chat box some of your ideas, if you want to declare it to the world, what are your 3 parts to your shutdown ritual? So if someone wants to do that, or maybe it's just one part that you want to share so we can see some ideas. So I'd love to see you start to share what your ideas are. And Randy, maybe we do poll 3 now, and then we'll do poll 4 here in a second if we haven't already done poll 3. I don't think we have.
We haven't. We can do 4 and I can do 3 later, whichever you want.
Yeah, there you go. Let's do that. Let's go. I
Do
want
4
now
right
what
now.
we're gonna do is we want you to assess, how are you feeling now about your ability to shut off, right? So has anything changed based on what we've talked about, right? So we're asking you to assess your confidence in your ability to turn off every single day. Based on process, maybe based on a plan you're starting to create in terms of your 3-part shutdown ritual. Yeah, how are you feeling about this? How are you feeling about your confidence in your ability to daily, as you start to think about maybe turning off from today or turning off from tomorrow as the weekend hits? Yeah, how do you feel about it? So we're having you reassess with the same question.
All right, and we have not everybody that's voted on the last 2 have voted on this one, so I just want to make sure everybody gets their response into question 4. We will go back to question 3 as a reminder, but right now we have question 4 up there, and we've been about 93%. We're only 87% right now, so I'm going to give you guys another second to respond to another few seconds to respond to this, and I'm going to close and share with everybody how we're feeling after that. And Brian, if you want, after this, and it's up to you, I can go through a little of things that from my standpoint, talking about stress and burnout and things that I'm going to talk about next week on my presentation, but reasons that we want to be able to do this, reasons we want to be able to shut up, because if we don't, it's going to lead to these uncontrolled stress issues that can just physically and mentally cause significant issues. All right, I'm going to share.
Yeah,
Brian,
that's great.
here you go.
Let's see if we have time. Yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, so yeah, let's look at the results. All right, so the results are a little bit more mixed now. Again, we still have one person that put themselves as a 5, 4 people at a 1, but now we have people more in the 2 and 3 phase. And that's good. Maybe you're feeling a little bit differently. Maybe your confidence is a little bit higher just based on some of these practices that we provided to you. And I really like what I just heard Michelle write in the chat box. She just said, "Hey, it's something I need to work on," right? And we haven't solved this issue for you. What we've done is we've given you some tools that you can now implement. And what I've heard people tell me, having put some of these into practice, which is it doesn't always go perfectly in the beginning. Okay, this is almost as if we're actually trying to create a habit, right? This is real good stuff, right? Whenever we want to create real kind of sustainable change, it usually gets to us creating habit change, right? This is about doing something almost every day, at least every day that you're working, actually putting this practice into place, right? And so I'll talk a little bit now just about habits, and whenever we're making a habit change, what goes into that. I'd love to hear from any of you, right? What are some tips that you have when you've tried to change your habit or implement something new into your life? What has worked for you? What are some tips that you could share with the rest of us, right? Whenever you're trying to change anything about your life, but you're trying to do it in a practice type of way where it's going to be something sustainable, where it's actually going to be habit change. So if anyone has any tips, I'd love to hear them from you and put those in the chat box. All right. Some things that I've learned, because at Intend to Lead, we really prioritize habit change because we know leadership is about a lot of things, but sometimes it's about being a healthy, habitual leader, right? And a lot of times the changes we need to make to be the person we want to be are actually about creating new habits, right? And Jenny mentioned an idea, try it for 2 weeks straight, then it usually sticks. Yeah, there's actually not a magic day. You know, sometimes Stephen Covey, who's an author, time management author, used to say it's 30 days to create a habit. That's actually not been proven. 30 days sounds good, and 2 weeks sounds like a great start, Jenny. I love that, right? And then just see where you're at there. For some people, it can be 6 days and then it's a habit. For others, it could be 50. It might take a long time for it to become something. But here's the way that the brain works, okay? Most of our day-to-day work, our decision-making is actually done in the outer part of our brain, right? The more evolved part of our brain, right? But habits are stored in this weird thing called the basal ganglia, which is actually something we've had since before we evolved, when we were cavemen and cavewomen and things like that. That's where our habits are actually stored. So in order for us to be able to push something into our basal ganglia where our body doesn't fight it, then it's when it becomes a habit. Okay. And you have to do that through repetition, right? That's why there are certain things in your life that you do every single morning that you don't even think about doing them, right? Just like brushing your teeth. I know none of us had brushing our teeth on our to-do list. We didn't have to do that because we automatically do it. And we probably do it automatically, just like we do a lot of the things in the morning, because we just do them because we've been doing them since we were so small, right? That's because it's put into your basal ganglia and you don't have to think about it. Okay. In order for something to get moved into our basal ganglia, we can't just say, I want to do this new habit. If it were that easy, we could just program our brain that way. We would just say, okay, I want to have a healthy breakfast every morning, or I want to do exercise. But we know our body resists these things, right? Because our brain is broken up into those two parts. And our brain actually has to understand what the true reward is. What is the reward for doing this? When our brain is convinced, and it's the inner primitive caveman part of our brain, the basal ganglia, has to be convinced that there's a true reward. So what is the reward for doing this? That's why it can be really helpful when you're trying to change a new habit to actually visualize what the payoff is going to be for you, right? If you guys all talk to me about the huge costs of not being able to shut down, now I want you to think about what are going to be the huge benefits of being able to shut down. How is your life going to change? How is it going to look differently when you're able to do this? And think about that. Maybe write it on paper, but definitely visualize it, right? What is the benefit to you creating this ritual? How does it result in a better life? What does that look like? All right. Another thing that helps us to get into habits is the social part of habits. You can share with other people your plans, your intentions to do this. That creates a little more accountability, right? Let other people know, I want to get better. If you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, someone close to you, your partner, I want you to consider sharing with them your intention to create this new habit, to actually have a formal shutdown ritual at the end of your day. You could also consider having an accountability partner, right? Is there someone else in my life that also struggles with turning off? If you work with accountants, I bet there are other people that also have some of the same challenge. So share it with them, maybe check in with each other, right? And then also consider, how can I increase the reward of doing this? Right? What works for me is when I'm trying to do a new habit, what I'll do is I'll actually print out a calendar, put it on my wall. Every single day I do it, I'll actually put a little red X in that date. And it feels good to see that red X. And I don't want to break the succession of red X's. So that works well, right? Maybe you, after you've done your shutdown ritual, you eat a piece of chocolate, something like that. That actually increases the reward in your brain and makes the chances better for it becoming a real habit. Okay. And again, if anybody has any questions about habit creation, habit forming, let me know. But that's the key, is to realize this is a habit change we're putting into place. It will take time. Like Jenny said, try it for 2 weeks. Give yourself 2 weeks, see how it goes, see how easy it then becomes to perform it every single day. All right, what I want to do now is I want you all to think about, I want you to think about what has resonated the most for you today. of all the things that I've talked about, maybe it was one of the 3 parts of the shutdown ritual, which one resonated the most for you, right? And what is your plan? I want you to think about this based on everything we've talked about, the strategies, the practices, the model, the 3-part model I've given you on creating a shutdown ritual, right? What most resonated for you? And maybe it was us talking about how hard it is to shut down and what some of the barriers are there, right? And the mindset that goes into that, right? Maybe it was just the idea of defining what boundaries are in your life. But of all the things that we've talked about today, what are you taking away from today, right? How are you making today worth it for you? Right. And I'm starting to see some answers there. So Brett said, make it intentional. Yeah. Become intentional about this. Right. Jenny said, creating an setup plan. I hadn't thought about how to do this before. Beautiful, Jenny. If we don't think about what we're going to think about, we're going to revert back to our old habits and we're going to think about work. We're really good at doing that. I promise you. Right. Chris said, documenting these goals. Yeah. Visualizing what the rewards will be if I leave work as my takeaway. And then Chelsea said, being intentional and shutting down. I love it. Right. Katie, your tools I appreciate. In my situation, your first slide of creating limits about work, that's preventing me from being able to shut down. Yeah, there's some self-worth in this as well, right? I'll tell you, I've had to challenge my own thoughts that I'm actually important enough to be able to shut down. There have been times in my life where I didn't feel worthy enough. Like I have to keep working. I have to keep proving myself. There's always some more things I could be doing. Right. I don't know anyone who's ever told me, Brian, I got down to my to-do list being 0, right? It just doesn't really happen, does it? There's always more work we can be doing. Okay. Kayleen said, I'm not the only one who struggles with this. People in the profession are not always good about sharing their struggles. Kayleen, that's where we need to grow as a profession. Sometimes we feel like we have to wear the mask and say, hey, you know what? I've got it all together, when I don't know anyone who has it all together. And I agree with you. We really do need to struggle. And I actually think as a profession, when we start to like take off our mask and be real about the struggles we have, we actually become more powerful. And that sounds counterintuitive, right? Because I'm being vulnerable. I'm taking off the mask. I'm letting people know, hey, you know what? This has been a chronic problem for me. I'm not good at shutting down, and it's affected my sleep, and it's affected maybe even my physical and mental health. But actually, by sharing that with other people, you actually make them feel empowered because they realize, oh, guess what? I'm not the only one. There's others like that. Right. So I love the idea of being vulnerable with others, sharing other people what's going on for us. If you have staff that work with you, you know, a lot of times they think you're untouchable. They think you've got it together when really inside, do you? Be real, be vulnerable. All right. Katie said, I don't think we like to admit we need to either delegate or tell supervisors that our workload is too much to make deadlines. Right. Yeah. So there's some vulnerability and just the idea of getting others to give us the help we need. I love it. That's related as well. Okay, I have enjoyed seeing some of your takeaways. That's empowering me. That is energizing me to know that there are people out there that like me that really struggle with this. That is empowering. That actually makes me feel more energized towards making sure my shutdown ritual is going well.
I think at this point, Brian, I will put up the 3rd polling question, which is actually the 4th. It's just going to be titled number 3. And then Brian, you let me know, but when you're ready, I will announce next week's webinar as well.
Yeah. Right. And I just wanted to mention to people that we do at Intend to Lead have a healthy leaders community that deals with problems like this, right? Ideas like being more committed to, you know, being more conscious committer, having healthy boundaries in your life. So we have created a community. It's very, very feasible. I just want to let people know, if you want to go to our website, you'll be able to see it there as well. But yes, I'm sorry. I wanted to get to the last comment that was there.
Let me end this poll. Just making sure everybody knows that the last polling question is up. Get your response in, because I'm going to end this thing in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure everybody gets their CP. Oop, 1 last minute vote in their response. So I'll give it another second. It's kind of like popcorn. When you hear that last kernel for 3 seconds or so, then you can close it. I have nobody else going in, so I'm going to close it. And you are all still here. All right.
Okay, so a question I had, you know, Paul mentioned the guilt over what isn't completed is the biggest problem for me, especially when there are deadlines involved. I love that. Paul, to be real about what your guilt is, about what gets in the way of you being able to shut down is huge, right? And I'll tell you, just from my own personal work, I've had to be really intentional about looking that guilt right in the face, right in the mirror, looking at it and saying, hey, you know what? I can actually make some other choices. Instead of me ending my days with what I didn't get done, with the guilt over what I didn't get done and what I still need to get done, I have chosen to be intentional about focusing on what I did get done, about focusing on, even if it's just a small thing, acknowledging something I accomplished that day. And that takes change. That takes a mindset shift. That takes a deciding to end your day in a different way mindset, right? Instead of me focusing on the guilt of not getting things done, I'm actually going to do the opposite. And I'll tell you, I fought it at first because it was so ingrained to me to feel guilty at the end of the day that I had to work against myself. But now that I have a daily habit of focusing on, for me, it's two things. One little thing that I can acknowledge I got done today, and two, it's just what am I grateful for in my life? I always want to end my day on that because when I'm thinking about what I'm gratuitous for, it helps me to be more present with what I'm going to do next. So I really appreciate that, Paul, because that's a good way, I think, for us to end this. And I just like to say what a pleasure it's been to go through this experience with you, to see so much interaction in the chat and to hear from all of you, to once again know and realize that I'm not the only one, right? That there are so many accountants out there that really struggle with this, right? And please share this with your friends, right? Especially if it's helpful to you, right? What of this is working for you? What part of your shutdown ritual is working? And like you all talked about, share some of the challenges, right? With people around you, with peers, with staff. You know, if you're struggling with this, it actually can be empowering for others to hear about as well. Don't keep it a secret. Again, it sounds counterintuitive. By us being vulnerable with each other, sharing with each other what we struggle with, we actually bring more energy to others. That doesn't sound right, but it is right. I've seen it. I've seen the power of knowing that I'm not the only one. So don't hide all of this. Don't hide the struggle and don't hide some of your successes as it relates to your shutdown ritual. And I'm really excited for you all to start this experiment. And again, I just want to say thanks to Randy and Tri-Merit and everyone else for giving me this opportunity to be with you. And I'll just hand it over to you to finish us off,
Well,
Randy.
I appreciate Brian. Brian, that was awesome. I really appreciate it. One thing before I'm going to give you a couple announcements here. One, a couple people had problem with the last polling question. So if you did, I know some people put in Q&A already that last one didn't pop. It looked like it did for most people because most people got their responses in. But if you weren't able to respond to that last polling question, just let us know in the Q&A or chat, and we'll make sure you get credit for being here for that 50 minutes and respond to the questions. What I did want to touch on quickly, this is almost going to be a follow-up next week. We're going to do a presentation. I'm actually going to present, and it's called Mental Health Awareness When Life Throws You a Curveball. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some things that Brian talked about today, stress and burnout, and if it's uncontrolled. And Brian obviously gave us great information on how to start controlling that, because if you don't, this stress can turn into burnout. This burnout can actually turn into mental illness potentially. And in the next week's presentation, I'm going to go through a personal struggle that I went through and talk about how I dealt with that, talk about how I came out of that, but then why this is so important to us as individuals and to our businesses. Because if everybody in our business is better physically and mentally, it's just going to be overall better for us as obviously individuals, but as self, I guess the word selfishly, as organizations as well. And really, that's what we're going to be talking about. So next week, if you would want, please get on the next webinar. You can link to it on our website. You probably get emails from us, but if you go to try-merit.com under, I think it's Expert Insights, you'll see the webinar series there. You can go register there, or if you get an email from us, you can register on that as well. Brian, again, I think this was awesome. I'm just going to plug one more thing for Brian. Brian and I did record a podcast together, which will be coming out shortly. I had as much fun recording that podcast as I did listening to him today. So I'm looking forward to that being released as well. And Brian, all your contact information is up there. I'm thinking you're going to have people reaching out to you. And thanks again.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks, everybody. Enjoyed
Right.
it.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.